Welcome to the video user's guide for the COVID-aware family time planning tool for families in dependency. As mentioned in our previous video, linked below, this tool, also linked below, was designed as a second-tier process for co-creating a family time plan between parents and caregivers. If it helps, think of it as a guide for facilitating a more robust conversation between parents and caregivers where you feel that both sides just need to hear each other out a little bit more and have a better understanding of where each household is coming from in developing a plan. This tool is most effective when used during a shared planning meeting where family time is the primary issue to be discussed. It was not intended to be used by sending it out to folks and having them fill it out separately. As it was being created, we envisioned the family social worker or a DCYF facilitator being the one primarily facilitating the conversation. And since most of these types of meetings are being held over Zoom or video conference these days, we also wanted to create a visual that could accompany the conversation so that those who are more visually oriented could follow along and process the conversation with more ease. So let's dive into the tool. After you click on the link, you'll see this page. Go ahead and click Start. The next couple of pages are some preliminary language to tee up the conversation. This first one discusses and provides rationale why parent-child visits are important, especially during a pandemic. It's chock full of academic references, so if you feel this can help persuade folks, by all means read it aloud, or just give folks a few minutes to read it themselves. Then click Next on the green button. This next page is more introductory language that helps folks set up their expectations for this process. Please let folks know that this isn't a Facebook type quiz that at the end will magically tell them exactly how to set up a pandemic family time plan with both a virtual and in-person component. It's designed to tease out serious concerns and solicit reassurances in building this child or children's family time plan between two households. And at the end, there will probably still need to be some negotiating and trading off of what the plan will look like. Click Next. Social worker email. At the end of this form, the system generates a summary email with all the answers that were selected or entered. This summary will be sent to the email address entered below. Please don't enter more than one address. The system won't like that. Click Next and enter the same email address again. If the emails don't match, the system won't let you move forward. So please make sure that both emails match and click the green Next button. Who's in the child's quarantine? From here on out, stuff in bold and larger font should be read aloud. Stuff in smaller font is there to provide additional context and instruction. Go ahead and click Next. Disclaimer, please read this aloud to make sure folks understand, then click Next. Let's start with the children. Here's where we get into the meat of the survey. A couple of things to be aware of. Number one, confidentiality. While we've tried to make this as secure as possible, let's not tempt fate. Use people's, including children's, first names, initials, or nicknames. Don't use last names or things that make the kids on the case easily identifiable. Number two, child-focused. You will find that much of the survey is child-focused. This is intentional. Other than trying to survive a pandemic, the one thing both households have in common is the safety and well-being of the child or children. They're both ultimately responsible for co-parenting at the moment. Siblings. Like it says, if there's more than one child and they're living in separate households, it's better to do separate plans for each. We tried to figure out a way to include kids across multiple households, but the programming required got very complex very quickly. So, like it says, different households, different plans, different surveys. Caregivers. This is where we begin to collect household info for caregivers. Parents will be next and answer the same questions. After getting a sense of who all is in the household, there are a series of questions regarding known vulnerabilities to COVID, including age and pre-existing conditions. You can click on the colored dot to indicate what the caregiver selects as their current assessment of their own risk or vulnerability. After you click on the dot, the background will turn white and move you on to the next question automatically. Also, from here on out, anything that is underlined can be clicked on, or you'll be taken to additional resources or guidance that explains the rationale behind both asking the question and what the current science says about the issue. Parents, same questions to answer for the parents. Like before, if mom and dad are living in separate households, it's best to do a separate survey for both mom and dad separately. This section provides a summary for both what the caregiver and parent said previously. Please review with all to get a confirmation that you've correctly recorded the info prior to moving on to the next section. If you need to make changes, simply scroll back up and make the correction. Scrolling back down to this section should now show the corrected response. Current family time visitation plan. Rather than answering all these questions for everyone, we'd highly encourage you to ask the group about what their understanding is of the current visitation plan. You can always correct folks or provide a learning opportunity if they're wrong or need additional clarification. Current restrictions to communication should be limited to court-ordered restrictions. So if someone suggests a restriction that isn't currently court-ordered, you should follow up with additional questions as to why this restriction is currently in place and course correct as necessary. And for the last portion of this section, simply ask how visitation is currently working for the 3 people and households involved, the caregivers, the parent, and the kids. There's no need to document. It's really just an opportunity for all to share their thoughts and feelings about how the current visitation arrangement is working for everyone, including the child. Click Next, and then ask the group which portion of the plan they'd like to work on first, virtual or in person. Giving the group the option of which plan to work on first should serve to reinforce the idea that this really is the parents and caregivers' plan to work out. And this is a relatively easy way to get a first consensus building milestone as we head into deeper waters. So let's say they pick in person first. It's highly recommended that you read these 2 intro paragraphs to the group. It helps set the context. And social workers and facilitators, here's your opportunity to put your facilitation skills to work. All of these next items are variables that can be somewhat controlled as part of the visitation plan. Use the accompanying text under each item to help set the context. Let the group decide. Don't make the decisions for them. Ultimately, they're going to be the ones responsible for carrying out this plan. If something they select throughout is a non-starter issue for you or extremely unsafe, then indicate that by suggesting that we can select that, but we're going to have a hard time finding a provider that will pick up that contract, or we'd probably have to go to court to make that type of change. If folks get stuck or bogged down on a particular item, you can always skip it for now and come back later. Keep the bigger picture in mind. We're encouraging folks to use this process to come up with a plan that everyone can agree to, using science and compassionate decision-making when it comes to the child. And you can use these potential areas of contention as leverage points for perhaps increased flexibility around virtual visitation we'll cover in the next section. This next section covers virtual family time, and by that we mean non-in-person visitation. And perhaps more than the previous section we covered, many of the concepts of virtual visitation weren't as perhaps fully explored or utilized as before to help ensure and maintain the connection between parent and child. Increasing virtual time may require a little more vulnerability on the part of the caregiver in terms of welcoming the parent into more of the caregiver's daily routine with the child. So we ask that as you're facilitating this portion of the conversation, you be sensitive to this issue. This is also why we chose to have the caregivers provide their flexibility first. And we encourage the parents to share part of their previous routines that they had with their child prior to the pandemic, and even perhaps before the dependency case. Part of the rigidity we found in dealing with both parents and caregivers when it comes to pandemic family time planning is each side's fear of the unknown, whether it be the unknown or uncertainty about what could happen if they or someone they love contracts the disease, and the unknown of how the child was or currently being cared for. Here's your chance to use your social worker skills or even superpowers to illuminate those shadows for the parents, caregivers, and children to help them get through these next few months. Let's review. After completion of both the in-person and virtual sections, you'll once again be given summaries of what was selected or entered previously. And like before, if something's not right, you can simply scroll back up and change it. When we piloted this survey, part of the feedback we received was disappointment that this tool didn't provide adequate closure of the potentially challenging conversation that was just had by the team. Use these additional questions as framing questions and add an acknowledgement of what just took place and to give the group the opportunity to share what they've learned to provide that closure. In-person and virtual plan summaries. In each of these boxes, capture the group's final plan summaries for both types of family time. Make sure that everyone is in agreement with how it's stated. If the group was unable to reach a final plan, then use this space to specify areas of agreement and where additional determinations need to be made. If this will ultimately need to go to court for a final determination, this will help the court understand all the work that had previously been done regarding family time and where to focus their efforts in reaching a decision. And finally, ask the group when the plan should be reviewed again, and if they can think of any circumstances when the plan should be reviewed prior to that date. Click Next and then Submit. You'll see this screen followed by an email in the inbox of the social worker given at the very beginning of the survey. If you don't receive this email within an hour, check your spam filters for an email from COVID Family Time, all one word, at watchchildadvocates.org. You can also use the same address to offer suggestions or improvements to this tool or to let us know of any glitches as well. And this form is set to clear all responses at the end of each day, so there's no way to go back and retrieve previous day's responses. So the email that you receive is the only record. And that should do it. Thanks for making it all the way to the end, and good luck in your family time planning.